Well, to discuss all that, Sally and I are joined by Bundeep Singh Rangar, the chairman of IndusView. Bundeep, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Let's start with the story in the International Herald Tribune and, of course, most papers about the G20 Summit in Canada. And clearly, there are a fair number of divisions there. They've tried very hard not to show them, but there is an issue over how to take the world forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess at the center of it is where's growth going to come from? And if you look at G8 versus G20, it's the world's wealthiest countries with the world's fastest growing companies. And I guess the real question here is it going to be domestic consumption that's going to drive growth for these countries, or is it going to be export-led? One of the reasons why the U.S. is pushing for domestic-led growth is because they do want China to release its currency greater. Because if that currency value appreciates, it makes the cost of U.S. goods into China cheaper, and of course that stimulates the U.S. economy, as opposed to in the past when recessions have been largely driven out by the U.S. consumer. So you can see why Obama is pushing for that.
I suppose they're worried about their European export markets as well, slowing down too quickly if all this money is cut from budgets. Absolutely,
and he's now saying slow down because you need to keep this pace of stimulus in there. Clearly, Cameron got a lot of kudos for his budget, this accent tax budget. Whether it works or not, we're not sure, because it's going to be one of those things that gets the economy all fired up in a few years, or it might just create greater deflation or a double-dip recession, which people fear.
But what they've agreed in some ways is stating the obvious, isn't it? Because the agreement to cut the deficit, or cut the individual countries to cut the deficit, is what most people have already decided to do.
Yeah, they kind of agreed, not to disagree necessarily, but they agreed to follow their own paths. And I guess one of the clearest examples of that was banking reform. So whereas the US and Germany and France and Britain pursued a bank tax, Canada, which is today greater in terms of banking market cap of the Canadian banking companies than Britain today, is totally opposed to that, as is Australia for that matter. So yeah, of course, for Cameron this obviously is good because his budget got an international approval, and it certainly works with the electorate, because if in 4 or 5 years from now Britain's economy is pulling out, beautifully timed for the next election.
Yes. Let's have a look at, something that's related in some ways to the public spending cuts in terms of all this unrest. First of all, let's look at British Airways and this final offer, it seems to be on the table from British Airways. How hopeful do you think there will be a settlement?
Keyword hopeful. So this dispute's gone on for nearly 18 months. This is a year and a half long, and the next strike is threatened for August this year. Not a great time given the holiday season. I guess at the core of this is British Airways is recruiting cheaper staff. They've got about 10%, 1,250 new staff members joining this year, later this year at a cheaper base rate. So the British Airways cabin crew union supported action is really to try and freeze anything that will take away some of their benefits, hopefully appreciation in salaries from 2011. I think they're doing the right thing by saying let's cast a ballot. But they've not recommended this. The unions are not supporting this and not recommending it, but they're leaving it open to the cabinet members to decide.
Interesting line in the Guardian newspaper about all this. They're quoting a BA manager who apparently claims on a Guardian website that the dispute is driven by a desire to break the trades union, and a climate of fear pervades the airline, showing, I suppose, that even BA managers are not quite sure at the policy that's being pursued by the airline here.
Yeah, I think everyone's kind of, waiting for what the cabin crew en masse decide, because it's a really hard one to say if they'll get further public support for this or not, because clearly in the past disruptions have been caused, and I think at some point the law of attrition sets in and people just say...
A lot of confirmation, I suppose, in this article, though, that the management at BA have been playing hardball, actually being much tougher than perhaps you might normally expect in such an industrial dispute, because they do want to get rid of the union.
Well,
or humbled.
Humble them, probably more likely. Get rid of them, I think, is going to be difficult. You've got the European Court of Justice behind you if it gets too far out. But clearly, given where we've got austerity measures and fiscal restraint coming in public sector and certainly in government departments, you'll only go so far to get support if you push for too much as a union member.
And strikes in Spain as well.
And strikes in Spain, absolutely. And
then we got a general strike tomorrow in Greece as well.
But I think, don't all these strikes tell us something, that people are still very reluctant to cut their standard of living despite what they're hearing from governments?
That may be true, but the world's changing really fast, right? So you can't afford to keep the same boring-led growth if you want to keep your place in a competitive economy. And clearly Britain, with its deficit that's matching Greece, can't continue that same way.
Look, let's end with this story. Not a happy story if you're an England fan. Very happy if you're, of course, from Germany. This story that England was out because of this goal here, which was disallowed as one of the reasons that England failed against Germany, that the referee just wasn't really looking. supposedly when this goal supposedly crossed the line. You can see it crossing the line here. And actually we had it as well with Argentina-Mexico with a controversial refereeing. What does that tell you about the Football World Cup?
It tells me FIFA needs to grow up and smell the rose of technology. This just has to happen, right? You can't have us being in 2010 when 60 million people are watching it thanks to technology that we now no longer have. Either instant replay by video or just goal line technology or some combination of the two. Every other major sport in the world uses it, especially when there's so much money at stake.
All right, it's a good point to end on. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. And that's it from the two of us, from Sally and from me. Goodbye for now.
Goodbye.